So, Chris, I think this is the most common question. What should my Google Ads budget be? Do you hear that question a lot from clients? And if so, how do you answer that question?
Oh yeah, definitely. As we've mentioned on the show before, this is one of the first questions they ask, and it's always the most difficult because there is no right answer. There's no number right answer, I would say. The right answer is, for me, at least the answers that I give, is start with low risk and build from there. Prove success at a small amount and then build from there. And I think most people understand that. You don't start with 10 grand when you can really only afford 100, 1,000, and then hope that you are able to recoup that risk. You start with a good spend. So yeah, very common, very understandable. What about you? I'm sure you hear it a lot as well with your clients.
Yeah, definitely is the most common question. And like you, I do feel like it's it's an easy question to answer and a difficult question to answer depending on how you go about it. So if you actually want the correct answer and what the correct answer is going to be 6 months into your campaign, 2 years into your campaign, and what they can expect, at that point, if things are working, that's a very hard answer. But if you just keep it simple and you're like, hey, we've got a great campaign built out, we need to start it, what are we going to start it at? Then it's a pretty easy question to answer. And I take the same philosophical approach as you in terms of, don't overdo yourself in month one. Just spend what you're comfortable spending while you try out this advertising platform if you're new to Google Ads, or if you just try out a new campaign on a long-term account. You kind of want to see how it's going to perform. And I take that same approach. What are you comfortable kind of putting at risk for this new strategy while we kind of dial it in and figure out what's going to work as time goes on? Now, that said, if I'm talking to the average client, small, medium businesses, I'm not talking national B2B or anything like that, but I'm talking like a local roofing company, local dentist office, something like that. I tell them most of the time for those kinds of campaigns, my clients start at somewhere between 1,000 and 4,000. That's usually my initial budget range for these small and medium sized businesses, local advertisers. And even when I say that, usually the clients still want even more guidance. And a lot of the times we start at that 1,500, 2,000 range. That's where we start. I think that's pretty reasonable, Chris. But what about this question of, well, I don't want to start at 1,000. I want to start at 500, 700, 300 a month. Is that doable? Or is that a totally different kind of client? Maybe we don't have a lot of experience with these days anymore.
Yeah, I think it's very common that people, want to start Google Ads and they don't want to just start at something that's, maybe over 1,000. They want to start under 1,000. And I think I'm never going to tell someone no, that doesn't work. The communication that I give is we can do 500, but the pace at which we learn will be slower. So in other words, if a client starts with 2 grand, I'll have significant learnings that I gather after month 2. Month 1, month 2, I'll have significant learnings. And in that, I mean search terms, competitors, search impression share. I mean, all that kind of, I start
new keywords we find out as we see some search terms.
Real understanding of kind of how we're going to do in the market. If you want to spend 500, that might mean that it takes 4 months to really get that same level of learning from the campaign. So small budgets work, but they take longer. And that time period is extended the higher your CPC is, So let's say that same client is, going to spend 500, but it turns out their CPC, their average cost per click, is $16 instead of $6 or $3. The more needed just to get one click is going to expand that time period. So bigger budgets accelerate the learning. I don't want to say accelerate success, they accelerate the learnings from the campaign.
Yeah, and this is something we're always thinking about and trying to improve on and come up with even better answers. You know, most of the time I leave it at 1 to 4,000. If you're a kind of local advertiser, let's start there and
Yeah.
see what happens. I think I don't want to get married to this number, but I think one way to maybe think about it would to maybe come up with like a minimum number of clicks per day. And I'm spitballing here. I just thought about this, but what I kind of like about that is it it will be flexible to whatever your industry is. So if you're in a $10 cost per click industry and you want to kind of know what that minimum budget is, the lowest you can go while still kind of getting some, as you call it, learnings during month one, maybe
Mhm.
you can tell the advertiser like, hey, at a minimum, I would go for 2 clicks a day. And then you have a $20 day budget times 30 days. If you run 30 days, $600 a month. And you kind of have a minimum budget there. And then if you're like in a $50 cost per click industry, maybe that's $100 a day, 100 times 30, 3,000. And it kind of gives you your answer on what maybe a minimum would be to get learning going on in just 1 month. Never really thought too much about that. Do you like that kind of estimated clicks per day?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can take it a step further and if you really want to give them an idea of expectations, you can uh, go so far as to say, well, let's assume that you get this many clicks, and let's assume you get a 1% conversion rate. This is the kind of lead ratio you might expect at this spend volume. Now let's take each of those factors. Let's take your CPC, crank that up a little bit, and then crank up your conversion rate. And you might expect this many conversions. So you can the variables are fairly limited. It's just basically what your CPC is and what your conversion rate is. And you can kind of tweak those to understand, where your budget might get you in the
Mhm.
first month.
Cool. And one final tip here, straight from Google. There's an article they have called "Choose Your Bid and Budget," and we'll link to this in the show notes. And their tip, I think it would surprise people, but it's kind of on brand with what we're saying here. Start small. That's literally what they say. Start small. If you're a beginner, try an average daily budget of $10 a day to $50 a day. That would be over the course of 30 days, 300 to 1,500. Check your account daily after applying a new budget to see how your campaigns have performed. So nothing wrong with starting small, because you can always change your budget and increase it at any time. I think that's kind of our main takeaway when trying to answer what should my Google Ads budget be. It needs to be enough so you can kind of get some knowledge going on and see some results, but there's no reason you can't start small and kind of learn from there.